In July 2014, Washington Post bureau chief in Tehran was arrested by Iranian Revolutionary Guard under the allegation of his involvement in a secret CIA operation. Jason Rezaian was in custody for 544 days while being charged with espionage. He was held in Evin prison, a place designated for Iran's political prisoners. His arrest was used as leverage in negotiations with Western countries over the Iran nuclear deal. He was finally released in January 2016 as part of a prisoner swap between Tehran and the US. My name is Schinas. I'm a journalist with iMEdD, and I met Mr. Rezaian in Perugia during the International Journalism Festival. We talked about his story, as well as the recent geopolitical developments in the Middle East and Tehran's attack in Israel. So, you were in Iran for a lot of years before your arrest in 2014, and you were also half Iranian. Before your arrest, had you ever thought that this might happen to you, to end up, being in an Iranian prison?
So, I had been working and living there for 5 years. And before that, going back to 2001, I traveled to Iran very often. Very familiar with the country, very familiar with the story of other dual national American Iranians who were arrested and other journalists. So that I knew that it was possible that this could happen, but I chose to take what I thought was a calculated risk because I always worked with full permission and very transparently. And I can say that there were other times in the years before I was arrested where I felt like something might happen to me. Less so when it actually did happen. So the short answer is yes, I thought it was possible, but I didn't think that it was likely when it happened, and I certainly didn't think it would last as long as it did.
And what's the one thing you remember the most, the most difficult moment from those, how many days? 554, right?
544. Look, solitary confinement is very difficult. To be trapped in a small box with nothing other than your thoughts, 24 hours a day with bright lights, not knowing what other people know about your circumstances, not knowing about my wife. I think that was very difficult for me. The first weeks, as the time dragged on, not having an understanding if my wife was okay or not was the hardest thing.
Do you think that Iran used this detention as a way to apply diplomatic pressure to the US?
100%. I think that was maybe not the initial intention, because when you look at cases like mine of someone being taken hostage by a regime like Iran's or the Islamic Republic in particular, sometimes it has a domestic component too. I think in my case there was some problems between the members of the regime who were negotiating with the United States and world powers over their nuclear program, and others in the Revolutionary Guard who did not want to see a deal happen. But ultimately, it was the Islamic Republic using me as a tool to extract leverage from the United States.
And can you explain the whole thing with CIA's project Avocado? What role did it have to your arrest?
So I had started a Kickstarter project in 2009, late 2009, basically with the intention of starting an avocado farm in Iran. I'm from California. Avocados are a part of our lives. Iran is a very fertile country where you can grow just about anything, but there was no avocados. And my hypothesis was that there's got to be a reason. Is it sanctions or is there some other challenge? And it was a metaphor, right? I didn't really think that I was going to become a farmer. But apparently there was a clandestine CIA, something named Project Avocado, that had to do with nuclear defenses and nuclear surveillance on Iran and other countries. Now, I don't know if the Iranians actually knew that at the time, but the avocado became a big part of my interrogations for months. And, when I tried to explain to them that this is Kickstarter is a website where people raise money to do projects. They just simply didn't believe me. And it was comical, funny that they were so simple and paranoid. Even in those moments, I thought it was funny, although I was in a very difficult and serious situation.
Are there avocados now in Iran?
There are. I've found somebody on Instagram who has a small fruit farm in the north part of Iran, and I've written to them a couple of times. I don't think they know who I am, but congratulated them on this because it's a fruit that I think when people become aware of it and use it, it goes with many tastes. Are there avocados in Greece now? Did they grow them?
Of course.
You say of course, but 30 years ago there was no avocados in Greece.
So I would like to go a little bit to the geopolitics, if that's okay with you, and ask about the recent developments in the Middle East. Iran struck Israel a few days ago for the first time from its own territory, and actually a few hours ago, while we are here in Perugia, Israel struck back. What's your comment on those developments, and do you think we will see another war in the Middle East?
I certainly hope we don't see another war. I think it's very reckless of both the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Israeli government to exchange these kinds of attacks on each other. The Iranian attack last week on Israel was very clearly telegraphed. So, the Iranians made clear that they were going to do this, and Israeli and allied air defenses were able to shoot down essentially all of the drones and missiles. So there weren't casualties, fortunately, and I'm glad that there weren't. I was hopeful that Israel would not respond, but they have. And I think with every one of these provocations, someone has to decide, okay, enough is enough. We've made our point, and de-escalate the tensions. If they don't, we will see a larger war. And I'm hoping that the international community, the United States, European partners are able to quiet the tension before it gets any worse.
And how could these developments in the Middle East and the potential war affect the role that two great powers, China and Russia, play in global politics?
So, I think Russia in particular has been quite clear with Iran that they don't want to see this conflict escalated. They're in the middle of their own conflict with Ukraine. I don't think that they will provide a lot of support for Iran in this moment. At the same time, I don't think that China and Russia want to see Iran fail. But then we also have to look at the dimensions of, what role both China and Russia play with Israel. It's a very complicated set of circumstances. It's not an easy Cold War or World War II world where you're on one side and they're on the other. There's lots of different interests at play. But I do think that China and Russia have an important role in convincing Iran to potentially not escalate further. The reality is Iran doesn't have the military capabilities to fight a war against Israel, and they know that, but that doesn't mean that they won't, automatically disengage.
So you think that China could play a role to bring the tensions down?
I think if they want to, they can, certainly. It could come in different forms, and defense capabilities that they could provide to Iran, financial inducements. They know their relationship with Tehran better than I do, but I do understand that the Iranian authorities rely on China for a lot in terms of imports and exports. So, China has influence over the Islamic Republic, certainly. Russia too.
So I think your panel is about to begin, so thank you very much for the interview.
My pleasure. Happy to do it.
Mixed and sound design by Aris Athanasopoulos. Produced by Panagiotis Menegos. You can listen to more podcasts by visiting podcast.iMEdD.org.